You know what's worse than finding out your own child has been lying about your death for money? Finding out she's been selling babies on the black market? And the 2 infants you've been caring for? They were next. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Right now, I'm sitting on this freezing airport bench at 11:47 p.m., reading the text message that just shattered my world. Mom, your return flight was canceled. Figure it out yourself. We need space to start our new life. Keisha, my own daughter, 68 years old I am, and she just abandoned me in Miami International Airport like I'm some piece of trash she's done using. But here's what Keisha doesn't know about her old mama, what nobody knows. While she was busy faking my funeral and collecting money from neighbors who thought they were helping a grieving daughter bury her mother, I was building an empire. Every dollar I scraped together working double shifts at the hospital, every overtime check, every tax refund, I turned it into 17 properties across Chicago. My ungrateful daughter thinks she left a helpless old woman to die alone in an airport. She has no idea she just made the biggest mistake of her criminal life. But before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now, let's get into my story. My name is Dorothy Williams, and for 70 years, people have been underestimating me. Tonight, that ends. Let me back up 2 weeks to when this nightmare started. I should have known something was wrong when Keisha called me at 2 a.m. "Mama, I need the biggest favor," she said, but her voice was shaking. In the background, I could hear a baby crying, no, 2 babies crying, and Brandon's voice, angry and getting closer. "Keisha, honey, what's wrong? Why are you whispering?" "Brandon and I are finally taking our honeymoon to Aruba, but we can't afford childcare for Marcus and Malia." The words came out in a rush, like she was reading from a script. Then I heard Brandon's voice clearly. "Tell her now, or I will." My blood chilled. "Baby, are you in trouble? Do you need me to—" "No." The sharpness in her voice made me pull the phone away from my ear. Then softer. "No, Mama. Just, can you help us or not?" This was the same daughter who'd been dodging my calls since her wedding 6 months ago. The same daughter who only invited me to the reception, not the ceremony, because her new husband's family found my South Side Chicago roots embarrassing. But something in her voice, the fear underneath, made my mother's heart override my common sense. "Of course, baby," I heard myself saying. "Grandma's here for you. Oh, and Mama, we already booked you a flight to Miami. You leave tomorrow morning. It'll be like a vacation for you too." The fake cheerfulness was back, but I could still hear the babies screaming. Red flag number 1. Nobody books someone else a flight without asking. But the line went dead before I could question it. The flight down was rough. The babies cried the entire time, and I was that passenger everyone glares at. But I managed. I've managed worse. When we landed, Keisha was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a text. "Had to leave early for honeymoon. Babies are your responsibility now. House key under the mat. See you in 2 weeks." Red flag number 2. But I was already here, already committed. I took those babies home and did what I do best. I loved them. I fed them, changed them, walked the floors with them when they were teething. I sang them the same lullabies I'd sung to Keisha 40 years ago. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. My arthritis flared up from constantly lifting the babies. My blood pressure medication ran out, and I couldn't figure out Keisha's insurance to refill it. I spent my own money on diapers, formula, baby food, everything Keisha had forgotten to stock up on. But I managed. I always manage. The morning of my scheduled departure, I got the babies dressed in their best outfits. I wanted Keisha to see how well I'd taken care of them, how much love I'd poured into every moment. Maybe she'd remember that I was her mother, not just free childcare. At the airport, Keisha barely looked at me. She was glowing from her Caribbean tan, dripping in new jewelry I knew Brandon couldn't afford. She hugged the babies with the enthusiasm of someone picking up dry cleaning. "Thanks, Mama. You can head to your gate now." That's when I realized she hadn't asked how I was, hadn't thanked me properly, hadn't even noticed I'd lost 10 pounds from the stress and constant movement. But I bit my tongue, kissed my grandbabies goodbye, and headed to departures. At the gate, they told me my ticket had been cancelled. Cancelled? By who? "The purchaser cancelled the reservation this morning, ma'am. You'll need to buy a new ticket." My blood ran cold. I checked my Fonino messages. I called Keisha, straight to voicemail. I tried Brandon, blocked. That's when her text came through, the one that shattered whatever was left of my heart. "Mom, your return flight was cancelled. Figure it out yourself. We need space to start our new life." Keisha. I called her back immediately, but she'd blocked me too. Standing there in that airport, watching families reunite and travelers rush past me, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, completely powerless. Here I was, a woman who'd raised 5 children as a single mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to put Keisha through college, who'd survived racism, poverty, and every curveball life could throw, and my own daughter had discarded me like trash. But then I remembered something Keisha didn't know about her old mama, something that would change everything. You see, what Keisha didn't know, what nobody knew, was that while I was emptying bedpans and working double shifts, I was also listening, really listening. Mrs. Henderson in room 314, rambling about how her grandson was too stupid to see the gold mine sitting right under his nose in Inglewood. Mr. Washington, complaining about how the city was forcing him to sell his worthless building on the south side for pennies. I started small, real small. A abandoned house here, a rundown building there, places people were desperate to get rid of. I'd buy them for the price of a used car and spend my weekends the weekends. I should have been resting learning to fix plumbing, patch roofs, replace windows. My first property cost me 3-0. A 3-flat in Bronzeville that everyone said would never be worth anything. Last year, a developer offered me 485-0 for it. But here's what nobody understood. I didn't just stumble into this. Every single property I bought, I researched. City development plans, transportation routes, demographic shifts. While Keisha was partying in college on the tuition money I scraped together, I was in the library studying neighborhood patterns like I was getting a PhD in urban planning. By the time I retired from nursing, I owned 17 properties across Chicago. Not mansions, but solid buildings, generating solid income. Enough income to live comfortably for the rest of my life, with plenty left over for emergencies. Like being stranded at an airport by your ungrateful daughter. But I'd kept this quiet for a reason. I'd seen too many families destroyed by money, too many children who stopped calling unless they needed a loan. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. Sitting in that hotel room that first night, staring at my bank statements on my phone, I realized Keisha had just freed me from that burden. She'd shown me exactly how much my love was worth to her. Now it was time to find out what everything else was worth. Sitting on that airport bench, I made 3 phone calls. First, to my lawyer in Chicago. Second, to my property manager. Third, to my banker. By morning, I had options. more options than my daughter could imagine. I booked myself into a hotel near the airport, the Marriott, because at my age, I was done pretending cheap mattresses didn't hurt my back. The babies and I needed a place to stay while I figured out what to do next, and more importantly, I needed to understand exactly what my daughter had become. The first thing I did was call her apartment. A man answered, not Brandon. Yeah? I'm looking for Keisha Thompson. This is her mother. Silence. Then, lady, ain't nobody named Keisha lived here in months. You got the wrong number. But it was the right number. I'd called it a dozen times over the past year, always getting voicemail. That's when I realized they'd been screening my calls through someone else, someone who'd been told to say Keisha wasn't there. I hung up and immediately called Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor Keisha had mentioned in passing months ago. It took 3 tries to find the right Rodriguez, but when I did, but Keisha told us her mother passed away last year, she said, confused. She even had a fundraiser for the funeral expenses. I gave her $50 for flowers. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Ma'am, what did this fundraiser look like? Oh, she had pictures and everything. You in a hospital bed, looking real sick. She said you had cancer and couldn't afford the treatments. Then a few weeks later, she said you'd passed peacefully. We all felt so bad for her. Pictures of me in a hospital bed. I knew exactly when those were taken. 3 years ago, when I'd had gallbladder surgery. Keisha had visited me exactly once, and I'd been so happy to see her that I'd let her take photos of us together. She'd cropped herself out and used my post-surgery exhaustion to fake my death. The babies were starting to fuss, needing their evening bottles, but I forced myself to keep asking questions. What I learned made me physically sick. The fundraiser had raised over 3-0 from neighbors, from Keisha's co-workers, from people at their church who thought they were helping a grieving daughter bury her mother, while I was alive, working, sending birthday cards that apparently went straight into the trash. That night, after I'd fed Marcus and Malia and put them down to sleep in the hotel cribs, I sat on the edge of that bed and faced a truth I'd been avoiding for years. My daughter wasn't just selfish or ungrateful. She was a criminal. That's when I knew this wasn't just about being stranded at an airport. This was about something much deeper, much more poisonous. My daughter hadn't just abandoned Mesh, he'd been systematically erasing me from her life, profiting from my supposed death while using me as free labor when convenient. The moral dilemma hit me hard. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to find some explanation that would make this okay. She was struggling financially, maybe desperate. Maybe Brandon was influencing her. Maybe she was just scared and stupid. But another part of me, part that had fought for everything I'd ever achieved, knew that enabling this behavior wouldn't help her or protect my grandbabies. Sometimes love means consequences. I made my decision. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those fake funeral photos, heard Mrs. Rodriguez's voice. We all felt so bad for her. The babies woke up twice for feedings, and each time I looked at their innocent faces, I wondered what other lies Keisha had told about them. By 4 a.m. I was dressed and in the hotel business center, printing everything, screenshots of her social media posts about her angel mother watching over her, bank records I'd pulled from my online account, photos I'd taken of her apartment, the eviction notices, the overdue bills, the empty refrigerator I'd had to stock myself. But I needed more. I needed proof that would hold up in court, because this wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was fraud. This was theft. This was a pattern of behavior that had probably hurt other people too. That's when I did something that surprised even me. I hired a private investigator. James Morrison came recommended by my lawyer back home, a former Chicago police detective who specialized in family financial crimes. When I explained what I needed, his face got grim. Mrs. Williams, if your daughter is running fake funeral scams, that's usually not where it stops. People who do this, they tend to escalate. What do you mean? I mean, we need to look at her work records, her credit history, anyone else who might have died conveniently around her. This might be bigger than you think. He was right. Within 48 hours, James had uncovered a horror show that made my blood run cold. Brandon wasn't just selling fake designer purses online. He was running an entire counterfeit operation using Keisha's nursing credentials to create fake certificates of authenticity. They'd applied for government assistance using false information about me being dead, claiming Keisha was a single mother with no family support. They'd used my social security number to open credit cards, claiming I'd given permission before my death. Identity theft, fraud, government benefit fraud. Me daughter and her husband were career criminals. But the bomb that exploded everything was what James found in Brandon's deleted social media messages. You need to see this, he said, handing me his laptop the third day. The messages were between Brandon and someone named Rico. The subject line made my blood freeze. Old lady disposal complete. Brandon, finally got rid of the old lady. She's stuck in Miami with no money for a ticket home. Rico, perfect. Phase 2 ready when you are. Got 3 more lined up. I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. Phase 2. 3 more lined up. 3 more what? 3 more elderly people to abandon? 3 more deaths to fake? There's more, James said quietly. I think your grandbabies might not be who you think they are. I was feeding Marcus his morning bottle the next day when my phone rang. Unknown number, Miami area code. Hello? Is this Dorothy Williams? The voice was professional, female. Yes, who's asking? This is Detective Maria Santos with Miami-Dade Police. We need you to come to the station immediately. It's about your daughter and the children you're caring for. My heart stopped. What's happened? Are Keisha and Brandon okay? Ma'am, they're fine. They're in custody. But Mrs. Williams, those children you have with you, we need to talk. In custody? I looked down at Marcus, who was happily drinking his bottle, oblivious to the chaos swirling around him. What do you mean, in custody? Mrs. Williams, your daughter and her husband were arrested this morning on multiple fraud charges. But there's something else. Something about Marcus and Malia that you need to know immediately. The way she said it made my chest tighten. What about them? Ma'am, we have reason to believe those children are not your biological grandchildren, and they may be in immediate danger. The bottle slipped from my hands, formula spilling across the hotel carpet. What are you talking about? Mrs. Williams, we've been investigating your daughter for months. When you showed up alive at that airport and had to use your real ID for a hotel, it triggered alerts in our system. We've been trying to figure out who Dorothy Williams really was, the dead woman whose identity was being used, or the living woman making hotel reservations. I felt dizzy. You mean, you being here, being provably alive and in Miami, just gave us the evidence we needed to arrest them? They can't claim they had permission to use a dead person's identity when that person is clearly alive and well. That's when I realized the first twist in this whole mess. Keisha's cruelty had been her downfall. By stranding me here, she'd put me in the exact place I needed to be to prove her crimes. But detective, I said, my voice barely working, what did you mean about the babies being in danger? Mrs. Williams, Marcus, and Malia were supposed to be sold yesterday, to buyers overseas. Your presence in that apartment is the only reason the transaction didn't go through." The room started spinning. I looked at little Malia, who was just waking up from her nap, and felt my world collapse completely. My grandbabies weren't my grandbabies at all. They were stolen children, and I'd been unknowingly protecting them from being trafficked. At the police station, I learned the full extent of what had been happening. Detective Santos laid it all out while I sat in shock. "Your daughter has been running identity theft schemes for over 2 years. Not just yours, she's stolen the identities of at least 6 elderly patients from the hospital where she works. All people who died on her shift." The room started spinning. My daughter, my baby girl who I'd raised to help people, was stealing from the dead. "But there's something else, Mrs. Williams. Something about Marcus and Malia that you need to know." The way she said it made my chest tighten. "What about them?" Detective Santos pulled out a tablet, showing me surveillance footage from Keisha's apartment building. The timestamp was from 6 months Agorite, around the time the babies would have been born. "Watch this," she said. On the screen, I saw Keisha and Brandon entering their building, but Keisha wasn't pregnant. She was carrying a baby carrier. Brandon had another one. This was taken the day after Keisha posted on social media about giving birth to twins, Detective Santos said quietly. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. "I don't understand." "Mrs. Williams, we don't believe Marcus and Malia are your biological grandchildren. We believe they were acquired through an illegal adoption scheme, possibly purchased from a young mother who thought she was placing them with a legitimate family." The detective kept talking, but her words sounded like they were coming from underwater. "Those babies I'd loved, cared for, walked the floors with, they weren't even Keisha's children. Where is their real mother?" I whispered. "We're still trying to locate her. But Mrs. Williams, there's more. We have evidence that suggests Marcus and Malia were supposed to be resold this week." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Resold? Your daughter and her husband appear to have been involved in a baby trafficking operation. They acquire infants from desperate mothers, keep them long enough to establish false documentation, then sell them to buyers who pay premium prices for untraceable children." I couldn't breathe. Those babies I'd protected, loved, cared for, they were supposed to be sold to strangers, sold by my own daughter. "The only reason it didn't happen," Detective Santos continued, "is because you were there. Your presence complicated their timeline, and they couldn't complete the sale with you in the apartment caring for the children. They let me see Keisha at the jail. I don't know why. I asked. Maybe some part of me still hoped there was an explanation, some way this could all make sense. She looked smaller in that orange jumpsuit, younger. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mama," she said, and started crying. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. That's what mothers do. But I thought about Marcus and Malia, about their real mother somewhere thinking her babies were safe, about all the elderly patients whose identities she'd stolen. "How long, Keisha? How long have you been living this lie?" She couldn't look at me. "The identity stuff started about 2 years ago, after Brandon lost his job. It was just supposed to be temporary, just to get us back on our feet." "And the babies?" "We really did want children, Mama. But when I found out I couldn't have them naturally, and we couldn't afford fertility treatments or adoption fees," she trailed off. "So you stole them." "We saved them. That girl didn't want them, didn't have any way to care for them. We were going to give them a good home. You were going to sell them, Keisha." Her face hardened then, and I saw the stranger my daughter had become. "You don't understand. You've never understood. You think your little nest egg makes you better than me, but I know about the properties, Mama. I've known for years. You could have helped us, could have saved us from all this, but you chose to let us struggle. The accusation hit me like a slap. Had I failed her? Should I have given her money instead of teaching her to be independent? But then I thought about those babies again, about their real mother, about the elderly patients. This wasn't about money or help, this was about choices. And Keisha had chosen to become someone I didn't recognize. I would have given you anything, I said quietly, but I couldn't give you character. That had to come from you. After leaving the jail, I sat in my rental car and realized something that shook me to my core. I was free. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't have to worry about what Keisha needed, what crisis she was facing, what money she required. The weight I'd carried for decades, the constant anxiety about my daughter's well-being, was simply gone. And in its place was something I hadn't felt in years, pure, crystalline clarity. I called Detective Santos. I want to do whatever I can to help your case, but I also want to adopt Marcus and Malia. There was silence on the other end. Mrs. Williams, that's complicated. There are procedures, evaluations, and their biological mother will need to be involved in any decisions. Then let's involve her. I want to meet her. That might not be possible. She's what? Another pause. She's in protective custody, and she's asked to meet you too. 2 days later, I was sitting in a conference room at the Miami-Dade Juvenile Services Building, waiting to meet the real mother of the children I'd come to love as my own grandchildren. When the door opened, my heart nearly stopped. The girl who walked in couldn't have been more than 16, but she looked like she'd aged a lifetime in the past year. She was thin, tired, with old bruises on her arms and a scar across her left cheek that was still healing. But her eyes were bright with intelligence and fierce with protective love. "Are you the lady who took care of my babies?" she asked, and her voice was stronger than I'd expected. "Yes," I said. "And you're their mother?" She nodded, then surprised me by reaching across the table to take my hands. "Thank you. The detective told me what you did, how you protected them. I've been so scared." Her name was Jasmine, and her story broke my heart all over again. 16 years old, thrown out by her family when they discovered her pregnancy. She'd been living on the streets when she met Brandon and Keisha at a free clinic. "They seemed so nice," she said, tears starting. "They said they knew a family who desperately wanted twins, who would give them everything I couldn't. They promised I could stay in touch, that it was just temporary until I got on my feet." What happened? They kept changing the story. First the family wanted to meet me, then they didn't. Then they said the family moved to another state. Then they said the family changed their minds, and they'd found another one. Every time I asked to see the babies, they had another excuse. That's when I asked the question that would change all our lives. "What do you want for them now?" She was quiet for a long time, studying my face. Finally, "I want them to be safe. I want them to be loved, and I want to be part of their lives, even if I can't be their only mother." I leaned forward. "What if we did this together? What if you came to Chicago, finished school, learned to be their mother while I helped? Not taking them away from you, but giving you time to become the woman they'll need you to be." The smile that spread across her face was the first real light I'd seen in days. What I learned next changed everything. Detective Santos called me the following morning, but she wasn't alone. FBI agents Johnson and Martinez were with her, and their faces were grim. "Mrs. Williams, your daughter's case has opened up a much larger investigation," Agent Johnson said without preamble. "We believe she and Brandon were part of a network that's been trafficking children across state lines for over 3 years. My coffee cup slipped in my hands. How many children? We've identified at least 12 confirmed cases so far, but we think there are more. Some were sold domestically, others internationally. The network spans from Florida to Illinois, with connections in Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Here's what we think happened. Your daughter and Brandon weren't just randomly committing crimes, they were recruited. Someone taught them this system, the fake identities, the funeral scams, the baby trafficking. They're part of something much bigger. But Marcus and Malia were likely their test case, Agent Johnson finished. The network probably wanted to see if they could handle the full process before giving them more valuable assignments. That's when Detective Santos dropped the real bomb. Mrs. Williams, we need your help. Not just with testimony, but with something more dangerous. I felt ice in my veins. What kind of help? We think the network is planning to silence your daughter and Brandon. Permanently. They're too visible now, too risky. But before that happens, we need Keisha to give us the names and locations of the other children who've been trafficked. Agent Martinez pulled out a photo that made my stomach lurch. It showed a man in his 50s, well-dressed, standing next to a black SUV. But it was what was in the background that terrified me, a missing child poster, and the child's face looked familiar. This is Carlos Mendez, who we believe runs the network. The poster behind him is for Maria Santos, Detective Santos's own niece, who disappeared 2 years ago. We think she might still be alive, might be one of the children your daughter helped traffic. Detective Santos's voice was barely controlled. My sister has been looking for Maria every day for 2 years. If your daughter has information that could bring her home, the stakes weren't just about my family anymore. This wasn't even just about Marcus and Malia. This was about a missing child who might still be saved, about a network that was stealing children and selling them like merchandise. And the only way to stop it was to convince my daughter to betray the people who could kill her for talking. What do you need me to do? I asked. I went back to see Keisha, but this time I wasn't going as her mother. I was going as an advocate for every child she'd helped victimize. I know about the network, I said without preamble. I know about the other children. Her face went white. Mama, I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus and Malia weren't the first, were they? How many other babies did you help steal from their mothers? She broke then, completely. The whole story came pouring out. Brandon had connections from his previous life. He'd done time for drug dealing and met people who dealt in harder merchandise. When they got desperate for money, he'd suggested they get into the baby business. It started with just one, she sobbed. A girl who really didn't want her baby, who was grateful we were taking it off her hands. But then Brandon's friends wanted more, and they were paying so much money, and we were so deep in debt. How many, Keisha? 15, maybe 20. I lost count. I felt sick. My daughter had helped traffic 20 children. But I pushed forward, thinking about all those mothers still wondering where their babies were. Where are they now? Who has them? That's when she looked up at me with desperate eyes. I'll tell you everything, but I need something in return. What? I want you to take care of Brandon too, when he gets out. He's not a bad person, Mama. He just made bad choices. Like me. I stared at my daughter, seeing clearly for the first time who she really was. Not the victim of circumstances she pretended to be, but someone who even in jail, even facing life in prison, was still trying to manipulate me into enabling her and her criminal husband. No, I said quietly, I won't do that. Then I won't help your FBI friends. I stood up to leave, then turned back. You know what the difference is between you and me, Keisha? When I was your age, I was poor too, desperate too, but I never once thought the answer was to hurt innocent people. You did. That's not about money or circumstances. That's about who you are inside. I walked away from my daughter that day, and I didn't look back. Keisha eventually did cooperate with the FBI, but not because of anything I said. She cooperated because Brandon, when he realized the scope of the charges against him, gave up everyone in the network, including her, in exchange for a plea deal. The network was extensive. They'd operated in 12 states, stolen over 40 children, and generated millions in profits. Some of the children were recovered, some weren't. Some had been sold so long ago, with paperwork so expertly forged that they might never be reunited with their birth families. Marcus and Malia were among the lucky ones. The adoption process took 8 months. During that time, Jasmine lived with me in Chicago, finished her GED, and started community college. She also started learning to be a mother, not the only mother, but one of them. It wasn't easy. There were nights when she wanted to run, days when I wondered if I was too old for this. But we made it work, the 3 of us raising those beautiful babies together. The trial was harder. I had to testify about finding the babies, about Keisha's lies, about the fake funeral fundraiser. I had to sit there while prosecutors detailed every crime my daughter had committed, every life she'd helped destroy. Keisha got 15 years, Brandon got 25. I felt no satisfaction in it, only sadness for the woman my little girl could have been. A year after the trial, I got a call that changed everything one more time. Mrs. Williams? This is Sarah Chen from the Chicago Tribune. I'm working on a story about the baby trafficking case, and I wondered if you'd be willing to talk. I'd avoided media attention during the trial, but something in her voice made me agree to meet. What she told me in that coffee shop downtown should have been the final shock, but somehow it wasn't. Mrs. Williams, in researching this story, I discovered something I think you should know. Your daughter Keisha. I found her original birth records. She wasn't born Keisha Thompson. I set down my coffee cup carefully. What do you mean? Her birth name was Jessica Martinez. She was 3 years old when you adopted her, after her birth mother Maria Martinez died in a car accident while fleeing from police. The name hit me like lightning. Martinez? Yes. And Mrs. Williams, there's more. Detective Santos. Who worked your daughter's case? Maria Martinez was her sister. Keisha's birth mother was Detective Santos's sister. The room tilted. Detective Santos, the woman who'd been so kind to me, so determined to break up the trafficking network, she'd been working her own family's case without knowing it. Detective Santos doesn't know yet, Sarah continued. I wanted to speak with you first, but Mrs. Williams, there's something else, something about why this network targeted your daughter specifically. My hands were shaking now. What? Maria Martinez, Keisha's birth mother, she wasn't just running from police when she died, she was running from Carlos Mendez. She'd been working for his trafficking network, and she'd tried to get out. The car accident that killed her? We think it wasn't an accident. The final pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They've been watching your family for decades, Sarah said quietly. When Keisha aged out of the foster system and reconnected with you, they saw an opportunity. A nurse with access to elderly patients and death certificates. A woman with abandonment issues who'd be easy to manipulate. They didn't just randomly recruit her, they specifically targeted her because of who her birth mother was. I thought I'd reached the bottom of this nightmare, but there was another level. Keisha hadn't just become a criminal, she'd been groomed to become one, targeted because of her birth mother's history with the same network. The daughter I'd loved and lost had been marked for destruction before I'd even adopted her. But that also meant something else. She wasn't the mastermind I'd thought she was. She was another victim, manipulated and used by people who'd been planning this for 30 years. D. I found the records. You adopted her when she was 3 years old, after her birth mother died in a car accident. According to the social worker's notes, you were told she might have attachment issues due to early trauma, but you insisted on moving forward with the adoption anyway. I sat in stunned silence. How could I not remember adopting my own daughter? But then it came back to me, slowly. The social worker, the papers, the little girl who wouldn't speak for the first 6 months. I'd been so young myself, so overwhelmed with raising my other children, that I'd almost blocked out the trauma of those early years. Mrs. Williams, there's more. Keisha's birth mother was also involved in identity theft and check fraud. She died while fleeing from police. The final twist. My daughter hadn't become a criminal despite my parenting. She'd become one because criminality was literally in her blood, combined with early trauma I'd never properly addressed. But here's what I realized sitting in that coffee shop. It didn't matter. Biology, trauma, circumstances, none of it excused what she'd done to those children. And none of it changed my responsibility to do better by Marcus and Malia. Today, 2 years later, I'm sitting in my backyard in Chicago, watching Marcus and Malia play in the sandbox I built for them. They're 3 now, chattering away in that magical language toddlers speak. They call me Grandma Dot and Jasmine Mama Jazz, and they've never known a world where they weren't completely, utterly loved. But there's someone else here today. Someone I never thought I'd see again. Detective Santos Elena Santos is sitting across from me at my kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee with shaking hands. 3 months ago, Sarah Chen's investigation led to the discovery that changed both our lives. Keisha was Elena's niece, the daughter of her sister Maria, who died 30 years ago. I should have seen it, Elena says for the 100th time. The resemblance, the age, something. How could you have known? I tell her, just like the previous 99 times. You were just a kid yourself when Maria died. Keisha was placed in foster care under a different name. There was no way to connect them. But that's not why Elena's here today. She's here because of what we found when the full trafficking network was finally dismantled. Her missing niece, the other Maria, her sister's daughter who disappeared 2 years ago, she's alive. She's 14 now, traumatized but alive, and she's coming home next month. The network Carlos Mendez ran was even more extensive than anyone imagined. Over 60 children recovered across 8 states. Some had been sold to buyers who genuinely thought they were participating in legal adoptions. Others had been kept in group homes, being prepared for future sales. Maria Santos' little Maria had been kept in a facility in Alabama, being trained to recruit other runaways. When the FBI raided it, she was found with 12 other missing children. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Keisha. Once she learned the truth about her birth mother, about how she'd been deliberately targeted and groomed, something changed in her. The manipulative, entitled woman I'd seen in that jail cell disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who looked like the little girl I'd adopted all those years ago. She gave the FBI everything: names, locations, methods, financial records. Her testimony helped convict 37 people and led to the rescue of children across the country. It didn't undo what she'd done. It didn't erase the trauma she'd caused or the families she'd destroyed, but it was something. It was a start. Jasmine comes through the back door now, home from her nursing school clinicals. She's in her final year, graduating with honors, and she's engaged to Marcus, not my great-grandson Marcus, but Marcus Williams, a social worker she met at church who loves those babies like they were born to him. Elena, you staying for dinner? Jasmine asks, giving her a hug. I'm making that jollof rice you liked last time. Elena smiles, the first real smile I've seen from her since she learned the truth about Keisha. I'd love that. Maria's coming by later. She wants to meet the babies. Little Maria Santoste, rescued girl, has been staying with Elena while she recovers. The doctors say she's making remarkable progress, considering what she's been through. And she's expressed interest in helping other rescued children adjust to normal life. As evening falls, I watch this unlikely family I've assembled around my dinner table, Elena and little Maria, still learning to trust again. Jasmine and Marcus, building a future despite their difficult pasts. The twins, oblivious to the darkness they escaped, secure in the knowledge that they are wanted and protected. And me, 70 years old and raising toddlers again, running a foundation that's helped place 43 rescued children with loving families. I think about Keisha sometimes. She has 8 more years on her sentence, but she's been a model prisoner. She teaches literacy classes to other inmates and coordinates with social workers to help identify other trafficking victims. We exchange letters now, not often but regularly. She's different, humble, more aware of the pain she caused. She asks about the babies, about Jasmine, about whether I think I'll ever be able to forgive her. I haven't answered that question yet. Maybe I never will. But I've answered a different question, one that's more important. Will I let what she did define the rest of my life? No, absolutely not. The children are calling for me, know all 4 of them, because little Maria and the twins consider themselves siblings despite the age difference. They want me to help them build a fort in the living room before dinner. I stand up, feeling every one of my 70 years in my joints, but also feeling something I haven't felt in decades, complete peace with the choices I've made. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest blessings. Sometimes losing the family you thought you had makes room for the family you were meant to have. And sometimes, just sometimes, being underestimated by the people who should know you best gives you exactly the power you need to save the people who matter most. People still ask me sometimes if I regret anything, if I would have done things differently. I regret plenty. I regret not seeing the signs of Keisha's trauma earlier. I regret not getting her the help she needed as a child. I regret that my desire to be loved for who I was, rather than what I had, blinded me to her desperation. But I don't regret the consequences I allowed her to face. I don't regret choosing those trafficked children over my daughter's freedom. And I don't regret the family we've built from the ashes of the old one. This morning, Marcus, the toddler, brought me a dandelion and told me it was pretty like Grandma Dot. Malia climbed into my lap and fell asleep while I read her a story. Jasmine called from school to say she aced her final exam. Elena texted to say little Maria smiled for the first time since coming home. These are the moments that matter. Not the betrayal, not the heartbreak, not the family I lost. The family I found. Sitting on that airport bench 2 years ago, I thought my story was ending. I thought I was just a discarded old woman with nowhere to go and no one to care. Instead, it was the beginning of the most important chapter of my life. I am Dorothy Williams. I am 70 years old. I am the mother of a convicted felon, the grandmother of 2 trafficked children, the adoptive parent of a teenage mother, and the guardian angel of a rescued girl. I am exactly who I was meant to be, and I am just getting started.